10 pounds, guys, right there. Look at that big rainbow. Big square tail. Game on at Collins Lake. Congratulations on that. That's a monstrous. Howdy guys, Cal Kellogg here. Welcome back to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please help me out. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, and you'll always know when I'm here on YouTube talking about trout fishing. Let's talk about top lining. Now, what is top lining? Top lining is as simple as putting a lure on the end of your line and putting it out a set distance behind the boat to troll, the water near the surface. All right. Now, this is the tackle I use a lot for top lining. It's just one of my downrigger rigs, Abu 5500 line counter reel, one of my Cal Kellogg salmon and trout downrigger rods right there. I've got it rigged up just as I would if I were going to fish off a downrigger. Main line, that is 10-pound trilene big game line, comes down, goes through a bead, troll and swivel, 8-pound test fluorocarbon leader, and in this case, I've brought it down to a cross-lock snap and a death prism trigger spoon, okay? For me, top lining typically means I'm running a lure in the top 5 feet of the water column. But depth, be aware that depth is dictated by what you put on the end of your line. If I put this spoon, say, 100 feet back, I got a little bug bugging me here. Guess that's why they call them bugs. Anyway, if I put this 100 feet behind the boat, say I'm moving at 2.5 miles an hour, that spoon is only going to be down a foot or two, which is awesome. That's where I like to spend a lot of time running baits in the fall, in the winter, and in the early spring. But let's say I was running this. Let me grab it here. Ow, that hook was sharp. Let me be careful here. Good gravy. Let's say I was running this. Let's say I was running a 3-inch mag lip. Now, if I run that lure back 100 feet on this rig, it is going to dive down to about 12 feet deep. So I'm going to be fishing 12 feet deep. So what you put on the end of your line definitely dictates how deep you're going to be fishing when, quote unquote, top lining. But let me get rid of this thing before something bad happens, like I hooked myself in the finger again. Owie, I drew blood a little bit. But for me, I really like to think of top lining as keeping a lure in the top 5 feet of the water column, okay? And a lot of times that's my trailing line. We'll get into spreads in a second, but that's kind of my basic top lining rig right there. No weights, no dodgers, no downrigger, no lead core. Now, there is one situation when I do use a weight with one of my top lining rods. If you're running a spoon or a plug, it's going to run under the surface, no problem. Everything's going to be great. Let me show you another rig here. Now, if you've watched the channel a lot, you know that I top line a great deal with flies and soft plastics. And whenever I'm using either a fly or a soft plastic, and I'm using that action disc right there, this entire rig, this is a trigger minnow. This entire rig has virtually, very little weight. The heaviest component in there is the hook, and the hook just doesn't weigh very much. If I'm using the action disc paired with a soft plastic or a fly, I like to put on a small, usually about 3/8 of an ounce, a small trolling weight right between the trolling swivel and the leader. I just put it in between those two, right at that junction. And this is enough weight just to ensure that that action disc or wiggle disc, depending on what you want to call it, gets underneath the surface. And truthfully, this little sinker paired with a trolling fly produces probably the majority of the really big trout I catch every year. Big trout last year came on this exact rig. I was top lining a number 8 white junior trolling fly, paired with an action disc. I was in Shallow Bay. I like to fish at Collins Lake. Young man on the boat, got an 11-pound rainbow. That was the biggest fish of my guiding season, this last spring. Got it on a little tiny fly, running maybe 2 or 3 feet deep below the water surface. Now, so that's the 2 ways I top line. Let's talk about setbacks when you're top lining. If I'm top lining out of my kayak, 65 feet is a pretty decent distance. Biggest wild rainbow I ever got. I talk about this fish from time to time. Lake Elminor, got just between a 7 and 8 pound wild rainbow up there. Top line and a trolling fly, and all I had on my line was a single split shot just to get it just right beneath the chop. Okay, so that was effective on the kayak. I was 65 feet back. In a power boat, 100 feet back is a good place to start, but you might experiment with putting your line back even further, and that gets us into my spreads for fall and on into the winter and early spring. I typically don't run my downriggers at all, or if at all, very much during the late fall, winter, and early spring. The fish that I'm targeting, the active fish, the fish that are most likely to feed, they're up in the top of the water column. Often they're close to shore, and I can very nicely target those fish with lead core and actually outfish my downriggers when I'm fishing at the same depths. My lead core rigs, my hybrid lead core rigs, will outfish the downrigger most of the time. Why? I don't know. They just do. And I get the same feedback from people. I got an email this morning from a guy who observed the same thing on his boat. The hybrid lead core rig outfishing the downrigger when the fish are, in the top 20 feet or so. So that's what I'm going to be running. Here's a spread that I'm going to be running on my guide boat up at Collins or wherever I happen to be guiding. I'm going to run 4 rods, okay? I'm going to run 3 hybrid lead core rigs. Try to say that a few times. Over here on the starboard side, 5 feet deep. Middle of the transom, 10 feet deep. Port side, 15 feet deep. And in one of the rod holders on the downrigger, I'm going to be running a top line, probably a fly, an action disc teamed with a small weight like that. And I am going to scope that back a full 200, maybe 225 feet back behind the boat. I'm not going to get a ton of strikes on that top line, but very often the biggest fish of the day, that bug is back, the biggest fish of the day will come on that top line. I've got some theories. Sometimes I think the fish come into the main spread, reject those baits, and then see that final offering silhouetted above their head, and they jump on it. Regardless of the reason, I'm speculating. The trout don't tell me much when I get them on the deck. Usually hit them with a stick, and that's kind of end of the story. They don't tell me a lot. But what I do know is very often that far setback, that long setback trailing line, when I'm on the guide boat, will pick up the biggest fish of the day. And a lot of those fish are really, really big, say fish over 8 pounds. So that's kind of the story on top lining. That's my philosophy. I top line with spoons for sure. I do a lot of top lining with flies and sometimes the soft plastics, the Trout Trix, the trigger minnows, the stuff like that. So I hope that clears up any questions you had. That's the kind of spread I'm going to be running. Hybrid lead core and top lines. It's super fun fishing. I am going to be integrating some dodgers and stuff. Don't typically use a dodger on the top line, but I will run dodgers from time to time on the lead core. Dodger philosophy: start out with a small dodger, increase in size as you think you need to. I'm Kel Kellogg. I'm out of here for now. I'll see you out on the water, and I'll see you again here on YouTube real soon.